Start your engines, we're gonna go far. Cause you're listening to Cat Jam in the car. You'll be listening to people in the industry. And the host of the show is your girl, Cat C. You got special guests coming in to interview. And the studio's a Porsche that's baby blue. Yeah, we got the green light with these superstars. So let's hit the road with Cat Jam in the car. 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 Cat Jam in the car.
Hey guys, welcome back to Cat Jam in the car. Today we have another special guest, Jenn.
Thank you so much for the ride. I mean, we're not going anywhere, but
Yeah.
you know, I appreciate you picking me up.
I know it's like 2 minutes. You can feel safe as an Asian female driver for like 2 minutes.
You're like, I used to do this while driving, and I lost a lot of guests that way.
Yeah.
I was just thinking though when I got in the car, I was like, this is the perfect cover for abducting people. You're like, get in the car. We're just gonna do a podcast, and you're like, why are we in Victorville?
I know, yeah. Like think about how like in the past people would be like, what? Just get in the car, like Uber invented. It's just getting in strangers' car, take you anywhere, and with Uber pool with strangers riding you in the car, right?
Exactly. How many episodes have this been shot?
So this used to be like a 53 episodes.
Oh, nice. My lucky, not really. But,
Is
yeah.
it? What's your lucky number, by the way?
My lucky number. Oh wow, I never thought about it. I don't know. Maybe 14. I don't know. I just feel
14?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So Jenn, please introduce yourself. I think you are the perfect person to introduce yourself.
Oh God, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how to do this on stage. So I used to work in sports. My name's Jenn. I used to work in sports. I worked in sports for about like 7 or 8 years, and then had some stuff happen where I had to leave sports, and then did a little bit of like entertainment broadcasting for a hot minute, but really like found myself when I fell into comedy. Okay. And like when I found comedy, I felt like it was like the perfect outlet for everything that I was needing in life. You know what I mean? Because when I worked in sports, I was so not serious, and to the point where like executives would come in and be like, you need to knock that off. Oh. So when I found comedy, I was like, oh, this is where I fit. You know, like this is like, I don't know how you were when you were a kid, but I feel like I was like kind of an outsider, you know what I mean? And didn't feel like I fit in. And I feel like comedy is kind of the perfect place for people like that.
A misfits.
We're all misfits. Exactly.
Yeah, like a misfits. Oh, this actually kick up the perfect first question I want to ask you as well. You mentioned about, you loved comedy, got into comedy, right? So how did you get into comedy? Like, do you still remember your first like open mic experience?
So I got into comedy actually via improv. I was working in New York City. I was working for Spike TV at the time, and I was interviewing a comedian who had a new television show coming out. I forget who it is off the top of my head, sorry. And he goes, you're really quick and you're really funny. He's like, have you ever thought about doing comedy? And I was like, not really. And I was like, but I've always been drawn to it. You know, like I remember my parents taking me to improv shows when I was super young. Had no business being there. It definitely was not PG-13 content. And then I remember when he said that, I was like, oh, well, maybe I'd give it a shot. So I took an improv class at the People's Improv Theater. It's called The Pit in New York. And that's where I started. And I fell in love with comedy. But I don't know. The more I did improv, I was like, you know what would make this cool is if we wrote it down and practiced it. So that's kind of how I ended up with stand-up. I came out to LA. I took Lisa Sunstead's Pretty Funny Women class. Yes.
Yeah, she did my podcast too.
Yep, took that class and fell in love with it instantly. And I remember my very first show was actually at I think it was Brea or Irvine Improv, one or the other. I didn't have a really good sense of direction back then, so it was somewhere south,
I feel you,
inland of LA. But I did my first set in this huge club, and I was like, wow, I don't even know how that went, but I want to do it again.
Wow. So your first set was a big club.
Huge club. Yeah, I had no business doing that. No.
That's yeah, like maybe that's just happened to be, right? Like lots of comedians go to open mic, but you just happen to be big stage. Like maybe because you already have those kind of experience hosting.
Right, exactly.
So you have stage presence already.
And I think that had a lot to do with how quickly I like integrated into the comedy world out here is that I knew how to talk in front of people for the most part. I'm still working on some of it. Mostly manners, but I knew how to talk in front of people. And so it felt like a natural transition from hosting and being myself to just telling jokes as myself. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't putting on a character. I was just literally going on stage as the goofy girl that I am.
Yeah. So do you write your jokes like, kind of like, like write as a script and then like, or just...
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I write for a lot of people. Like, you've probably heard jokes that I've written and you didn't realize that I wrote
so you're
them.
like a joke writer as well.
Yeah, that's honestly,
that is so cool.
That's how I make my living, is writing jokes for other people.
Wow.
So sometimes I feel like it can kind of confuse my voice. So one of the things that I'm working really hard on right now is really honing in on like who I am and not like who the audience thinks I am, and explaining my story so thoroughly that people can relate to it. Because I feel like some of the things that I've been through, it's just not relatable when you get on stage and you start talking about it. So it's finding ways to take those stories and connecting them to audiences where they go, oh, I get you. Like, I might not have been through the same thing as you, but I can totally sympathize with what you've been through.
Yeah. So like, and Jen, you also mentioned about your background. You started as a sports kind of sports journalist, right? So like
Journalist was a loose word, but
so,
yeah.
so more like host. Oh
Yes,
yeah.
a sports host, essentially.
Sports host,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like you did that for a couple of years, right?
Yeah, I worked. So I left college early because I got offered a full-time job at Sports Illustrated, and I was like, "Why am I
Whoa,
still? Yeah,
that
why
is-
am I gonna still
Exactly.
keep taking classes?
You don't have to. Yeah, exactly. The most successful people always dropped out college.
Yeah.
Look at Mark
But I
Zuckerberg.
finished. I actually finished.
You
So
did?
I took the job with Sports Illustrated, and I was basically doing this series where I'd travel around, and I would interview people in different college towns, and I would show people like the flavor of college towns, and then that kind of evolved into like me doing like an advice column for college kids. But while I was doing all of that, I enrolled in all my online classes. So I actually finished up my diploma while I was working for Sports Illustrated.
Whoa, Jen, you're very Asian. You're very, very good at school. Working hard and also study hard.
Yeah, I just felt like I had already put myself through so much of it, you know what I mean? And school was always really important to me. I was like, I have to have this piece of paper. And that's all it is. It's a piece of paper. I don't use it. My degree was in criminology and psychology. Like, I was a double major.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was going to go to law school. I wanted to argue for a living, and now I'm like, I want to do the exact opposite. But I was just trying to make my parents proud, and now I'm doing stand-up comedy. So you know how that's going.
So how do your parents feel about that?
My dad still asks me whether or not I'm going to get a real job, which is crazy because
I
I'm like,
feel
you
you.
know what? My bank account says my job is pretty real.
Yeah, so like you did pretty well, right? Because like, you have a real career. You even finish school while you're working. And that is such a fun job, going to different college, right? You must have had such a great time.
It didn't feel like work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it just felt like I was reliving my college experience, but I was getting to try on all these different universities. You know what I mean? And like their like nightlife. And so, and every city was totally different, and had its own like unique personality. Like, I loved working in Madison, Wisconsin. I loved working at LSU. So I really did get to see the country. Oh, Oregon. How can I forget Oregon? Oregon was amazing. It was like going to like a Nike factory, basically, because you get to see all the different uniforms and how cool, how much Nike has really integrated themselves on that campus. So it was really neat. It felt like an episode of Cribs, but with college football.
Oh my God, you can write a book about that, like a college towns, right? All this.
I mean, I could write a book about a lot of different chapters of my life,
So,
but it wouldn't be a picture one, that's for sure.
like, do you see yourself more like comedians or TV personality? You also did modeling. I did a bit of research. You were on Maxim and Playboy. Wow.
Yeah, that's actually how I got started, which is crazy. I think of the modeling chapter of my career as like such a small piece of it, because I really don't see myself as a model. I've never seen myself as a model. I desperately wanted to be one when I was in high school, and like my mom would take me to all these different castings and things, and every single casting they were just like, she doesn't have the look we're going for. They're like, not our look. Yeah. And it
Was
was
back in Miami?
This was in Tampa.
Okay.
So, but I would go to all these different castings. I mean, I even auditioned to be in Sports Illustrated, and then I made it to like the second level, and then it just never came through because they were just like, she just doesn't have the look of a traditional model.
Wow.
And that something about that just really stuck with me. And so I've never put a ton of emphasis in that part of my career, but I do know it exists, and I know that when I finally got offered like Maxim and Playboy and things like that, I was like, oh wow, this is that validation I was looking for, and I got it, and I was like, I really don't need those.
Yeah, I think
You know, like I was so much more to myself at that point, you know, where I was like, I guess it was a fun chapter when I was young and in my 20s, but like they never tell you how little money you're going to make when you do Playboy.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
so, people are like, oh, you must have gotten rich. I'm like, no, I made $800.
Yeah. So
Like probably after taxes, like 500.
kind of people just idolize that. They think, oh my gosh, you were on Playboy.
You made it.
Yeah,
Not really.
you made it. Like,
I made a bad decision.
yeah, but like I think it's still kind of cool. You have all those experience, right?
Yeah.
And then like you said, you know, later on your mentality has changed. You realize, oh, this is like, you know, nothing.
No,
you
not at
already
all.
did that. But like it's like you've been there, done that, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like the things.
I've been there, done that. You know, I can check it off the list, but like, I just don't. I think at some point, especially I think aging has really made me confront like that part of your life doesn't exist forever. And more importantly, like I hated the way that I talked to myself.
You mean back then?
Back then, you know, like how I felt like I was fat, or I felt like I wasn't pretty enough and things like that. And now I wish I could just tell that girl like she was enough. She was enough, and she didn't have to take her clothes off all the time to be that, you know? So
Yeah, I feel like
now I feel like I have more ownership of it. You know what I mean? Like now I get to dictate what I wear. And before it was like giant corporations were making money off my body versus me, you know?
Right.
Now I'm a small business owner.
Yeah, exactly. Now you feel like you have control of yourself, right?
Exactly.
Like you know you're doing this for yourself.
Yeah.
Like you're doing comedy, it's your own voice.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
am my own boss now. And, you know, sometimes days at the office are hard, but
Right.
I'd rather work for myself than anybody else.
So you enjoy this stage of life more.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm actually starting to figure out who I am. I don't think I've completely figured it out, but I'm definitely heading in that direction.
Yeah, that is so cool because I feel like that's kind of like lots of young girls who are struggling. I think we all have been there, done that. Like you mentioned, when you were high school, you were desperate, want to get on those, you know,
So much.
magazine. Because I think lots of young girls feel the same way, right? And they feel like you wanted that validation from other people.
Yeah. Like I wanted to be the pretty girl. I wanted to be the popular girl. And that was just not, that was not the role that I filled in high school. You know what I mean? I was very much an outsider. I was very much a nerd.
So you feel you were like the outsider in high
For
school?
sure, yeah. I was a band nerd, you know. I was in
What kind
musical theater. What instrument did I play?
Yeah, what instrument did you play?
I played flute, but I mean, I also played piano, I played guitar. A flute was just the one that I took on the field. And then I also did like drum major, which is like the person that conducts.
Oh, whoa.
So I did that for 2
Like-
years. And yeah, you know what? I can see why I wasn't popular.
Hey, band girl later on always turns out to be a cool girl.
You know,
Right.
we have those experiences.
So Jen, you also worked as a former like a sport, like you mentioned about Sports Illustrated, like you know journalist, and later on you also work as game day host for the New York Jets, right? So what is like you know you think you know back then you mentioned about you feel like that's not what you really wanted to do back then, right?
Yeah. You know, when I was working in television and working for other companies, they very much could dictate like what I wore and what I looked like and how I presented myself. And oftentimes like the scripts and things that they would give me or the copy they would give me dumbed me down a lot. You know what I mean? Like they really wanted me to be this dumb, ditzy, like cool girl, like a Jenny McCarthy type. And it's like, I was so much goofier than that. I was so much goofier than that. And I wish I would have owned that sooner and not felt like I had to be so cool all the time.
So you feel like at the time you were told to present sort of like the image you were not.
Yeah, this was in 2008, you know, this was in like the height of like the Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, like the pretty hot mess type girls, you know, and if you worked a lot in the industry in the mid 2000s and you made it out with any sense of like dignity and mental health, like you deserve a medal.
So you've been through that.
Yeah. I watch those documentaries about like all the girls that I used to idolize when I was younger, and I'm just like, wow, like we were all going through the same thing, just on different levels and different spectrums.
Yeah, I also feel like how much our pop culture has changed, right? Like
our pop culture's changed. Women are allowed to have a lot more ownership over themselves now and agency. And like I said, it was, and people, you know, there's been a lot of like pushback on it, and people have like a lot of stigmatism around women like owning their sexuality and owning their bodies and being able to present certain ways. But at the end of the day, I think people are scared of it because they don't control it. Like companies can't control us anymore. And we're finally taking agency over ourselves. So
yeah, even like
sorry, I'm totally screwing up my audio.
That's why I even feel like in comedy world has changed. Like nowadays with social media, you have control of your voice, right?
Yeah.
Like that's another thing I do want to ask you. How do you feel about, like, you know, by the way, when did you start like stand-up comedy officially?
I started stand-up officially in 2013. Yeah, 2013 was when I started stand-up officially. That's when I took my first class.
Right.
And then I took a break sometime in 2017 because my ex-husband really didn't like me doing it. He tried to control and censor what I said on stage and things like that. And it really made me feel bad, and it made me feel shame about who I was and my stories and how I got there. And I think stand-up is so much more the opposite. It's about vulnerability. Like, the people who are the best at this are the people who are just able to get up there and be the most honest version of themselves. And I wasn't able to present that to people because he didn't like who I was when I did. So I stopped doing stand-up for a while. Plus, he just didn't like a lot of male comics, and it just caused so much tension with me in the comedy scene. So I left. I got married. I took a bunch of writing jobs behind the scenes while all of that was happening. So I still stayed in the game. I still kept that muscle going. And then I think in 2021, after the pandemic, you know, happened, comedy kind of came to like a standstill, and the whole world did, obviously. And I had lost my television job, I'd lost my radio job, and stand-up was like the one place I felt like, oh, I don't need a boss. I don't need a company to say we have a budget for you. Stand-up was something that I could just jump right back into, and I had control over it. And since I've come back to stand-up in 2021, like I haven't done a single show for free. Like it was something about me stepping into my worth and being like, no, this is going to be my career now. This is my career. This is my focus. And my ex-husband was not happy about it, obviously, even though he says he was. No. And eventually I ended up, you know, getting divorced, and now stand-up is my,
So you mean
my
like
partner.
this? Oh yeah. So now you're single again.
Yeah.
Congrats.
So now I'm back in stand-up, and yeah,
Yeah,
without a husband. But
you have more material for your comedy right now, right?
oh, 1,000%. And honestly, when we were in the throes of the divorce, like, I felt like I was going on stage and not talking about it, and it came off so inauthentic. And people were like, we feel like you're lying to us. Because I was making myself out to be the bad guy, and I was talking really poorly about myself. And I think people were just like, something's off here. And audiences can smell when you're not being authentic. They can smell when you're being dishonest with them. And so I remember the show that I came out and I told everybody what was really happening. And I still have the tape from that show. And it was just such a magical night where I was just like, I feel like I'm owning my story again. And, you know, you're going to go through iterations of that your entire comedy career where you're going to be like, that old set isn't who I am anymore. Look how I've evolved. Your set's going to constantly be changing with you. And if it's not, maybe you should be doing some self-work and maybe some therapy, you know, like, and so that way you're evolving. Because I feel like if you don't evolve, much like if you're in a partnership with somebody and one of you is working on themselves and one of them is evolving and the other person isn't, eventually you grow apart. The same thing happens in your career, you know? So if if the industry's evolving, if the industry's changing and you're staying stuck in yourself, like there's going to be a huge disconnect. Do you know what I mean?
Right, yeah, exactly. Just Darwin said as humans, we constantly have to evolving. You're adapting, right? Like you mentioned about the things that your comedy, sort of comedy is like also like kind of, it's a journey of your life as well. Like
100%.
You're being honest on stage. You talk about it because it's kind of like your own voice. Your voice has changed with a divorce, with being single again, and growing up more. And I think it's about your voice, right? Like you said, the audience can sense that pretty well. So like, Jen, do you sell yourself as a tour comedian? Do you like on tour, or do you want to just say, oh, you want to do your own thing, like a comedian, like they have different paths, right?
I've done the road comic thing and I don't hate it. I think it really depends on who you're on the road with. You know, I've been very fortunate to go on the road with some great comics. You know, when I first started, Bert Kreischer gave me my first like road gig, and then I worked with Brad Williams for a little bit, Mark Ellis, Chris Porter. Like I've worked with some amazing comedians. I think it really just depends on who you go on the road with. And if they understand you and they understand your process, you know, because if they don't understand your process, a lot of times, like when they give you notes or they mentor you and things like that, like they're not going to give it to you in a way. If they can't give you the notes in a way that makes you feel safe and like you can digest the material, or they work differently than you and they don't understand that and leave space for you to have your own process, sometimes it can kind of create a little bit of tension. So, but I love touring. I love being on the road. I love new cities because I feel like LA, you kind of get in this little bubble.
Yeah.
And you think the rest of the country thinks like this and acts like this and cares about the same things. And the fact of the matter is when you go outside of LA and you do gigs, you realize, oh, no, the country is a very different place and it changes from region to region. And I think that's when you really develop as a comic, when you get to take your stuff out on the road and test it in front of different audiences.
Yeah, so that's why getting on the road for comedians, that's such an important journey, right?
Yeah, I think you have to. Everyone has to go through that process.
So do you have any like a fun experience when you're being on the road? Because I remember like sometimes I talk to those male comedians or they were like, oh, let's just enjoy like, oh, the girls. I'm like, what? And like for female comedian, I'm sure like what we experience is very different. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we could care less about, hang out with boys. No, that's like.
No, not at all. I think I have a different experience on the road, maybe because I'm older and a woman, obviously. I think that I value like my rest and relaxation because being on the road is so tough on your body. Like I don't know how the guys that do it every single week of the year don't just disintegrate, because it is taxing. So I think that it's just really important when I go on the road to like build time in to rest. Like I always have a pre-show nap. I always have a pre-show nap, kind of like to like reset my day. I just am all about self-care when I'm on the road because if you aren't about the self-care and you feel like you've got to go out and you've got to be on all the time and you've got to be being an influencer and you've got to be seeing all the sights and you don't take any time to like recharge, you're going to burn yourself out.
Yeah, you need your own space because you're with people all the time, right?
100%.
Like, you know,
and it's so draining.
So do you also feel lonely? Like I heard lots of comedians also mention, sounds fun, but it's actually a very lonely experience being on the road as well.
No, I don't feel lonely at all. I think it's because I like being alone.
Also,
if you don't like people, the road is a great place.
Yeah. So you have lots of your own like alone time,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah. And I think that's important. I really do. But it's so funny because while I think alone time is important because you get to know yourself, I do think there's something about, I think you learn just as much about yourself in partnership or in groups of people, like collaborative groups. That's why like I love writing with other people, where even if they're just in the proximity, like close proximity where I can bounce an idea off them or I can say something out loud and see if it gets a reaction, I enjoy that part of the writing process. And I do like doing that with people. Like I can get a good baseline of things and I can write stuff down, but I truly like having like a writer's room type vibe just because that's the dynamic I'm used to.
Yeah, I enjoy that kind of time as well, like writing session with other, especially the comedians you feel like you can communicate with, bounce out the ideas, like just writing.
Yeah, you have to be careful that the people that you're working with understand your voice and aren't projecting their voice onto you.
Wow, that is such a great point. Yeah, Jen, you brought such a great point because I remember, like, you know, as a comedian, sometimes you go up the stage and like lots of comedians will come to give you their suggestion.
And you're like, that's adorable. You haven't lived my life. You haven't lived my life. You haven't been in my body. You don't understand my perspective. And sometimes that's why I ask people when comics give you notes, like pay attention to whether or not they're able to like speak your comedy language. They have to understand your perspective. Otherwise, like tags and stuff don't work, you know? So I think it's just really important that when we're giving each other notes, like to really think about the other person's perspective and where they come from.
Yeah, because they have lived your life. Like they don't know what is this joke's background,
Yeah.
backstory.
When guys try to give me notes, when guys try to give me notes or tags, I'm like, that's adorable. You can get on stage and you look like a human Muppet and people will laugh at anything you say. When we get on stage, there is an immediate wall that goes up between us and the audience, especially female audience members sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
That we have to break down. We have to chisel away, and we have to gain their trust. And it's got to happen fast. Because if it doesn't happen fast, you're dead in the water. You know what I mean? So just even, I don't know how you feel about it, but I still feel like every day I get on stage, I agonize about what I'm going to wear. I agonize about how I'm going to present myself to an audience because I never want to come off as a threat. You know? So that's something that I definitely like take into consideration, that I don't think men have to. Like men are like, I'm just going to put on the same band shirt and jeans every time I go on stage. You know?
I totally feel you. Like honestly, because like you said, you wanted to build that trust with lots of female audience as well. They want you. I don't mean we need them like us right away. You want to build that trust.
Yeah.
So then they can like sort of like, you know, accept you as a comedian first. And then not judging you. Because a lot of times they're just like this.
Yep. And so
make me laugh.
Exactly. If you can't make the women in the audience laugh, then the men won't feel like they're allowed to laugh. Because they're there on dates.
Yes, they need
permission. No one's going to laugh. And you're screwed.
That is such a great point. Yeah, because like, you know, you feel like you needed to make them to trust you first. Like the man, they were like, okay, they were looking at a woman. They needed permission to laugh. So it's like,
she's not laughing.
Yeah, so like I needed permission from her first.
Yep.
Yeah, and then if the women start laughing, normally the guys,
which is smart.
Like, yeah,
you should look at your date and see if she's laughing first.
Yeah,
it's a really good indicator of how your night's gonna go.
Yeah, that's why I think as a female comedian, like it's kind of smart. Like you mentioned, that you go up a stage, you want to build like you. Sometimes you have to be considered what you wear, how you present yourself, and you don't want people kind of mentally object to you first. Because that is like, because like you said, it happen fast.
Absolutely.
Like you have to get them right away, and if they take them too long to start accepting you, oh, your studies are over.
Yep. Right? Exactly.
It's also mental game. Yeah.
It totally is. I think one of the most valuable things I did when I got out to LA is I took this class. It was taught by a man named Sam Christensen, who's no longer with us, but was just a delight of a human being. And the whole class was about how audiences and people perceive you without you saying a word. Like what your essence is that you just give off naturally. Like who you are, what's your baseline, what's your story, and what do people get off you right away. And I think taking that class was one of the most valuable things I invested in, because I had just been through a major traumatic event where I had people throwing things at me and throwing insults at me that I digested and I took very deep to heart. And the fact of the matter is, it really screwed with my sense of self. So I didn't even know who I was or how I was presenting. Like I was completely lost. And taking this class was so interesting because the first thing they make you do is they make you sit down in front of a room of like 30 people, and none of them have met you. And they give you a list of 300 words, and you have to circle all of the words that you think apply to the person sitting in front of you. So all these people are sitting there and they're all circling their papers, and you tally up all of the words that people kept circling for you. And my top 5 returns were funny, sarcastic, witty, guarded, And my top return that nearly everyone in the class circled was damaged.
As comedians, y'all say.
And I was like, so you just described a comedian. But I also think that was an eye-opening experience for me because I didn't realize I was carrying that around with me. I didn't realize I was carrying that pain around with me so visibly that other people could see it without me speaking. You know what I mean? So after that, the next step is they make you tell stories. And so you tell a bunch of stories, they give you prompts, and then after that, people are writing down like little phrases that they think of when they are hearing you speak and talk about your life and things like that. And you talk about it very openly and honestly. And from those phrases, you gain ways of talking about yourself, especially the parts of your personality that you might not like. You might not like personally, but they're things that other people see and you should address them. So one of the things that they told me was they're like, smart-ass Disney princess. And I was like, nailed it. Another one was honesty is an art form. What are we doing? You know, stand-up comedy. Another one was the most lovable asshole you'll ever meet. And so sometimes when I'm struggling with jokes, I like to kind of run them through those filters and be like, is this authentic? Like, is this in my voice? Does this match the things that people think about me? Or close enough? Are there elements of it? So that way, one, I don't over-present it and like act on stage because I feel like that's just, it's hack. But also I want to make sure that it's in my voice and it's authentic, you know? So it's like, it's a cool filter to be able to run your bits through when you know, oh, this is how the audience is going to perceive me. It also inspires bits. It's kind of cool.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a really valuable workshop.
Yeah, definitely. Because like that's kind of like how, you know, the people project you like very honestly, like it's like first impression. And,
yeah, but mine is like more like honesty. Like it's like I'm so honest that I'm cringe. You know what I mean? Where like I say the things that everyone in the room is thinking, and we're like, she knows she doesn't have to say everything out loud, right? Like that's kind of more what my honesty is. So.
Cringe. That's like a Gen Z's favorite word these days. You know,
cringe.
TikTok is like sort of like made these cringy things.
But be okay being cringe. Be okay being
it's a
cringe
generation
with
thing
comedy.
as well, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think our generation felt like we had to be so cool, and now it's like, no, it's okay to be. It's okay to be a little cringe. It's okay to not have to be so tough, and we can be softer and more vulnerable and goofy. You know, like that's. Yeah. I think older generations felt like we had to hide all of that, and we don't.
Yeah, like everything you have to like really hacked out. Yeah, I think that's another thing about the comedy world has changed. I didn't know back then. I'm kind of still kind of new in the game compared to those comedians have been doing this for 20 years, 30 years. They were talking about how the comedy world was like. Yeah. Right. Compared to now, I think, oh, we're kind of lucky because nowadays you sort of like you have your own platform, like you mentioned about, right? I mean, you
can have so much more control over your voice and your trajectory,
right,
than you used to. Right. And if you go on stage and you are undeniable, people can't say no to you. Look at what Matt Rife did, you know? Whether or not you like his comedy or not, he made himself so undeniable that the industry had to take notice.
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing I feel like as a comedian those days, you have control of your own career. If you think you're funny, put it out there. And then let the whole society decide your material is good or not. Obviously, comedy is subjective. Not everybody's going to like it. No. But the people like your comedy style is going to be there, right?
Exactly. You will find your own audience.
Yeah, exactly. But there is also one thing I do want to talk to you about this as well, Jim, with the whole, people mentioned about the whole woke culture, and then woke culture and the whole cancel culture. They said compared to older comedy, that's one thing that missed a lot.
Yeah.
They said back then people have freedom to say, it's not like say whatever, but they said they feel they have freedom to write, to, you know, just express their own voice. But with the whole woke culture and cancel culture going on for, let's say, our generation, like even Gen Z, we're so subconsciously trying to avoid conflict.
Yeah. It's also this weird thing that everyone thinks everything on the internet needs to be made for them. Like, oh, I don't like this. So I'm mad that you offended me, and it's like, at the end of the day, you weren't my audience. And that's fine. That doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make you a bad person for not liking me. We can have differences of opinion. I feel like eventually the pendulum is going to fall back a little bit more in the middle, and we're just going to recognize comedy for what comedy is. And that is a place that we can come together and talk about ideas and make fun of ideas. You know what I mean? Like we can make people happy that way. But this idea that everything on the internet or everything in a comedy show needs to be curated for you. Just because I don't like someone's comedy doesn't mean they are an amazing comedian. It just means I'm not their audience.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I can still recognize that they're talented. I can still recognize that there's an audience for them. And I also think when it comes to canceling people, just as someone who has been canceled, someone who has been canceled through no fault of my own, actually, there is not a more devastating feeling than feeling like you've been ostracized by society, because it just perpetuates that whole thing that like you're bad, you don't belong, you're an outsider, and it really digs in on that wound. But I think before we cancel people, maybe we should take a look at who they are and like what their true intentions are when it comes to comedy. Because at the end of the day, we're just trying to make people laugh. We're just trying to make people laugh. Is some of it lower hanging fruit than others? Yes. But like, I don't know. I just feel like censoring people and canceling people, we're going to lose so many important voices in comedy that are going to be the ones to push boundaries, that aren't going to be the ones that feel like they have to curate their entire set to making people happy. And like, that's people pleasing.
Yeah.
That's people pleasing on stage, and it's gross. And I think the majority of audiences, not in LA, the majority of audiences want nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we've got to find that middle ground.
Right. That's why people said maybe the whole cancel culture thing is going to be going away soon. Maybe people realize, like, you know, oh, if I go to a comedy show, I have to overthink. Should I laugh at this joke or not? Just overthink.
If you have to think whether or not you should laugh at a joke, you need to not be at the comedy show, and you need to be in your therapist's office.
Exactly.
Like, because it's just, if you have to think, wait, am I offended about this? Like, did you laugh? I think you laughed. Like, I feel like when you start overanalyzing stuff, you take away, like, the spontaneity. Like, laughter is spontaneous.
Exactly.
You know?
I love that.
So when you have to stop and ask yourself if you're offended, like, that means you're not present. It means you're constantly worried about what other people are thinking, and you're people pleasing, and you're wondering, like, wait, am I supposed to be offended? Am I supposed to be offended? Like, deal with your stuff. I go to therapy on a regular basis, and one of the things that I really pride myself on is I may not always get it right, but I am always looking at situations going like, is my response to this, is me getting offended by this, saying something about me or something about the other person? And it's often like, sometimes it's like, I'm not necessarily envious, but like I'm sad that I can't do what that other person is doing because I don't feel like I have the freedom to do it or to speak like that way because I'd be told that I was bad or things like that. I think once you've been canceled, you view things like that a little bit differently, and you are scared, and you do feel like you have to walk on eggshells. And I can't wait. There's no psychologist out there that I'm aware of. Like, there's no clear path, like, once you've been canceled, like, how to come back and, like, how to get back. And I don't think you're ever the version of yourself that you were pre-cancellation. Like, there's no way back to that version. Like, being canceled changes you. And so I think it's just finding a way forward and being the most authentic version of yourself, whatever your new authentic version of yourself is.
Yeah, and also own it, because if you know this is you wrote this joke came out from like a good place, right?
Yeah.
You're not trying to offend anybody, and own it. It seems like what happened. You heard about what happened to Matt Ripe's Netflix special. It's the same thing. Like the two things: domestic violence and the disability people. And the people created so many internet memes and just trying to cancel him.
I do think there is something to The way Anthony Jeselnik writes jokes is he's like he writes things that are dark, like super dark jokes, super well written jokes, well crafted jokes. But I think one of the things that I took away from him, something he said on one of his specials is make sure the target is not the victim. The target of the joke is not the victim, and then you can say whatever you want.
Whoa, that is genius. Yeah.
Make sure the target of the joke is not the victim.
That is such a genius.
And then play within those lines, you know? So
Even like, I remember Margaret Chow had this experience that she talked about this in this documentary. Because remember a couple of years ago, like the raping joke is sort of like, kind of like offensive to some people. Lots of like rape victims feels like you should not talk about rape in your stand-up comedy. And then coming from her experience, she kind of talk about that on stage from her experience, and then some like a female audience member feels so offended because they feel like you were talking about this, not helping it. You are exaggerating the thing. So like I don't know what really happening exactly. It's just like just kind of prove like sometimes you talk about those kind of jokes, you're gonna offend a certain group of people because everyone came from different space, different experience, how they take the joke.
And one of the funniest things is when you see an audience get upset about a joke about yourself, where it's almost like they feel uncomfortable because they feel bad for you. And so I talk about it when I'm working with like different writing clients and things like that. It's finding a way to give an audience permission to laugh and like letting them know like, hey, I'm okay. We can laugh at this. You know what I mean? But and you often do it in a joke, or you like hide it right before a joke, like you hide it in the premise. But it's just a way of being like, hey, we can laugh at this. I'm fine. I'm fine. And like, I hate that we have to do that. It's almost like we have to say, just kidding, after every joke we tell. No one else has to do that on any other job. But
yeah, I feel like sometimes we sort of like hesitate to say, I'm just kidding. Oh, because you kind of mentally, you're like, is it okay? I see that.
Yeah.
Right. It's like,
we'll get over it eventually, I think.
It's like, that's kind of like the situation going on, like the whole cancel culture, vogue culture. But people, you see like what happened to Shane Gillis, and then he's coming back.
Yeah.
And I saw someone comment and said comedy wins eventually. It just says like maybe people feel like, just like you said, laughter should be spontaneous.
I don't think Shane ever left. I think Shane just found his audience. Shane found his audience that's okay with what he does and understands his voice and understands where it comes from, I felt like he was set up to fail though, because he came out and when he hosted SNL recently, he came out and was like, he right off the top had to acknowledge that he had been canceled or that he had been fired from the show. And it's almost like it put everyone on edge, like, ooh, that's right, we're not supposed to like you. And it almost changed, I feel like, how he presented his set, where it's almost like he came out there expecting to fail. And if you step on stage and you expect to fail, speaking from experience, you 100% will. You know what I mean? Like, if you walk on stage and you're like, people aren't going to like me, 1,000%, you're going to be playing scared, you're going to be playing different, you're going to be people-pleasing while still trying to do your material. And that's the thing. When you write a joke, when you deliver the joke, you have to kind of put yourself in the same mindset you were in when you wrote the joke. Otherwise, like if a joke stops connecting, it's like, what has changed since then? Is it my perspective on the joke? Do I not think this joke is funny anymore because my thoughts on it have changed, So I think with Shane, I didn't necessarily hate his SNL thing. I liked that he took big swings, but I also feel like SNL knew what they were doing when they brought him back. And they don't necessarily have the best audience. It's kind of like when you take shows that you're like, I don't know if that's my audience. Those are the shows that I think you learn the most from, because you have to get up there and fight. And if you don't fight, then you're dead in the water.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to go forward. Yeah, doing it. Okay, one last question about comedy. We're going to do some fun questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So So when you mentioned about like earlier, we talked about how like comedy is supposed to be like your own voice. With you growing up older, your jokes kind of change, right?
Yeah.
It's like the thing. So when you do like a set nowadays, do you feel like sometimes comedian we always do our older jokes as well, right? Because you think that jokes work so well. So like, do you kind of like change that joke a little bit, adapt what you experience now? Like constantly, do you feel like you?
I either adapt a joke to the world around me, the environment that I'm in, I adapt it that way, or I change it so that it stays authentic to me and what my experience is, But sometimes it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, As long as no one's getting harmed by it. Sometimes overthinking stuff like that makes it worse, because you're like, I work with clients that are constantly changing their material, and they never want to do the same material twice. I'm like, that's not how you get good at it. Like, that's not how you get good. If you want to do that, that's fine. Take an improv class. Like, do improv. That's what improv is. It's doing something once and it never happens again,
Yeah.
But if you want to do stand-up, like, you have to... I think that's part of the magic, is seeing how different crowds and how different jokes work with different audiences.
So what's your next step? What's your goal in comedy?
My goal in comedy is to just learn how to be more vulnerable on stage. I think I'm really leaning towards that now, and really figuring out what my voice is and just leaning into that full force. And truthfully, being myself and being less apologetic about it.
Yeah.
Being less apologetic and being less scared that I have to make everybody happy.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for me.
I totally feel you as well. I feel like as a woman, a lot of times we constantly say sorry. And you feel like, oh yeah, okay. Even sometimes it's like, you don't have to say sorry. We just feel like we constantly feel like, yeah, we have to say sorry. Even like just because maybe it's a hormonal thing as a woman. Yeah.
I think it's just that we just aren't used to taking up space. And with comedy, you have to take up space.
Yes, we got to own it, right? You just feel like, oh, do I belong here? Like, yeah, this is my stage or not? You're like, okay, actually, I actually own this stage.
100%.
Right. All right, so almost at the end of the podcast. Thank you. I love talking to you.
No,
like,
thank you.
Like,
You've given me a lot of insight. Like, it's funny, just like talking with another comic gives me so much insight. Like, to the point where like I just had to write an idea down, because I don't know how you are, but I have really bad ADD. And so if I have an idea for a joke, I have to like put it in my phone and then decipher my notes later. Yeah. So I was like, I just want to make sure she knew that she inspired me and I wrote something down.
Yeah, totally. I'm the same way as I write like on my iPhone. If I'm driving, sometimes I put over. I have to write it down.
You have to write it down or voice note it to yourself. You know what I mean?
Even like sometimes I was sleeping, I learned a lot of things. If you have that pop in your head, I have to get up to write it.
You have to.
Next morning
you will not remember it.
Yes, because I lost so many great inspiration things. I was like, oh, I should get up to write
down.
Yeah,
but you also lose a lot of bad things too. Sometimes I'll like open my phone from the night before and be like, wow, Ambien was on fire last night.
Yes, Ambien totally messed up your mind sometimes. Yeah.
Don't write on Ambien.
Yeah, totally. So, Jenn, if you can only choose one type of food to eat for your rest of your lifetime, what would it be?
One food to eat for the rest of my lifetime. Wow, that's a great question. I'm going to upset all the vegans, but this is me being authentic. I love a good steak. I've always loved a good steak. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like it powers me, like it makes me strong. I love a good steak.
You're speaking my language now.
Did we just become best friends?
I just literally started liking steak so much the last couple of weeks. I will tell you the reason why later on. Like almost every single day I'm having steak right now. So, all right. So another fun question, if you are in jail, who is the first person you would call?
That's a good question. I know who I wouldn't call, and that's my parents. I would call my most chaotic friend humanly possible that I knew also had money and a lawyer. And or was a lawyer. Yeah, I'd call my friend that was a lawyer.
Okay.
I'd be like, I promise I'll pay you back for this, but I'm gonna need your services and bail. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Jen. So, anything you want to promote about yourself? What's next in your chapter?
Yeah. Follow me on Instagram at Jennifer Sterger. That's where I post all my shows. They're usually either in my stories or I'll put them on my main. I have some shows coming up with the Netflix is a Joke Festival. So
Congrats.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. And just check out my Instagram. And there's a link tree there that has all the dates for my shows and if I'm going to be hitting the tour, hitting the town near you.
Awesome. Cool. See, don't you love conversation with comedian? I can talk to comedians like you all day.
Same.
It's
It was
so
so
fun.
much fun.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Bye.
Start your engines, we're gonna go far. Kids been listening to Cat Jam in the car. You'll be listening to people in the industry, and the host of the show is your girl Cat C. You got special guests coming in to interview, and the studio's a Porsche that's baby blue. Yeah, we got the green light with these superstars. So let's hit the road with Cat Jam in the car. 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 Cat Jam in the car.